Welcome friends, we are discussing the online course titled HSE, that is Health, Safety and Environmental Management in Offshore and Petroleum Engineering. We are now discussing through module 1, where we are going to discuss in detail the environmental impact caused by offshore and petroleum industries. So, environmental management, in lecture 3 today we will talk about the consequences which essentially come from drilling accidents and how the drilling discharges can disturb the ecosystem balance in marine environment. In the last lectures we already seen various factors which actually affect the environmental impact caused by the activities caused in offshore and drilling fields. We have already said the different stages in drilling, exploration, production, etc., how in different stages we can have environmental impact caused to the marine ecosystems. Now, to be very specific, let us now see how the drilling process alone can focus on the environmental issues or impact caused to the ecosystems. Drilling accidents of course occur due to unexpected. We know that drilling accidents are unavoidable. We can say they are unintentional. In real sense, they are actually accidents. But essentially they result in heavy blowout of hydrocarbons from the well. Of course, hydrocarbons and liquids, let us say, from the well. To be very specific, from the drilling wells, and the main consequence of such blowout is they result in very large oil spill. That is one of the important consequences which arise from drilling accidents. Very interestingly, the literature data shows that one of the major accident which is still being spoken in oil and gas industry, one of the major accidents which occurred near the shore of Mexico in of course as old as 1979, the blowout of the rig Stock 1. The interesting fact, as you are aware or as you will be reading from the open domain sources, is that the oil spill resulted from this specific blowout stayed there, or let us say continued for about 10 months. That is fairly a large period, and the quantity of oil which spilled out is about 3000, and somewhere the concentration is so high as 6000 tons. So, one can seriously see the quantitative impact caused by such blowout accidents and the period with which it affects the ecosystem. So, both of them are parallelly important for us to really know the seriousness of any such consequences which occur from the drilling accidents on offshore environment. Now, to understand this further better, let us classify drilling accidents into two parts. So, drilling accidents can be classified essentially into two parts. Class 1 type and class 2 type. Class 1 type actually refers to the catastrophic situation which involves very intense and prolonged hydrocarbon discharge. Let us say gushing. Gushing is a phenomenally high discharge. The second class actually refers to a routine hydrocarbon spill. This essentially comes out during even the normal drilling operations. This is very common even during normal drilling operation. There is no reason that it should always happen only as an accident. Therefore, the second class of drilling accidents generally are not frequently reported. Because it is more or less a routine part of the offshore industry process. And moreover, it is also not responsible for causing serious pollution. So, they do not cause serious pollution. So, we are more bothered about the intense and prolonged hydrocarbon gushing, which actually results in catastrophic situation. So, when we say drilling accidents, we refer to type 1 or classification 1 of drilling accidents. The next important source which actually causes imbalance in ecosystem is accidents caused in the underwater storage reservoirs. We know offshore platforms are built for various purposes. So, offshore oil production systems, or let us say offshore platforms, are built for several functions. Storage is one amongst them, but storage, if it is a part of the function of the platform, it requires lot of reserve space. Due to limitation in the reserve space available in the platform, especially in production platforms. So, in drilling and production platform, generally there is limitation in storage space. So, to overcome this difficulty, people construct what we call underground storage reservoirs. A large tanks will be constructed which are actually commonly used in the present terms, because in the present scenario the production and drilling platforms, which are essentially semi compliant in nature, have a serious limitation in terms of storage space. So, there has been an improved usage of underground storage reservoirs. So, essentially these reservoirs are used to store liquid hydrocarbons. They actually store liquid hydrocarbons. There is no harm in allowing them to store the hydrocarbon. The difficulty here is they store them in comparatively a large volume. That is the problem here. They are used when the tankers are deployed for oil transportation instead of pipelines. So, there are two ways you can transport oil from the production platform to the shore for processing. Either you can use pipelines or you can use shuttle tankers. Essentially, underground reservoirs are used wherever people generally use oil tankers or shuttle tankers instead of pipelines. Now, where are the risks arising when you use underground reservoirs? So, the causes for risks in underground reservoirs can be, one, due to collision of the vessels, that is the shuttle tankers with that of the reservoir. There can be also collision which is caused by the tugboats, etc. So, the risk occurrences of these kind of incidences in offshore industry is comparatively on the higher scale. Now, the question asked very commonly is, when such accidents can occur? The answer is very simple. Such accidents usually occur when the tanker is in the loading process. Alternatively, it can occur when there is a severe weather condition, because during loading process the tanker has to be enabled to come as close as possible to the reservoir. Now, the question comes, when damage occurs, what happens? When damage occurs to the underground reservoirs, what happens? That is what we are interested to know. As I said in the beginning, underground reservoirs have very large volume of hydrocarbons. So, on damage they will become a concentrated source of marine pollution. Because this will toxicate the marine environment or marine ecosystem with the methanol content of high concentration. That is one bad news. Now, there is a good news here. The good news is they will be contained or restricted only to a concentrated area. They will not spread easily. But however, their concentration in that area or this extent of pollution may not be there, but the concentration of pollution will be very severe. The concentration of pollution is very severe, which affects the ecosystem very bad. So, therefore, it is a matter of concern for all the environmentalists. Alternatively, you do not allow the shuttle tankers to transport oil from the underground reservoirs to the onshore for processing and discharge. Let us say I am using pipelines. Now, let us see what are the consequences caused when you use pipelines for transporting oil from the underground reservoir or from the production platform to the coast. Let us say we will use, let us say, pipelines. They are also hazardous, they are not hazard free. So, pipelines are generally used to transport the explored crude oil to the shore for further processing. We all know that crude oil cannot be used as a commercial product, you need to process that. So, you transport the explored crude oil from the production platform, because you cannot do the processing in the production platform itself, because the space availability on a production platform is very highly limited. Neither you can store this oil in the production platform, because the storage volume is also not available in such production platforms. So, you need to transport it either on daily basis or on then to then basis from the production unit to the other coastal side. Now, what are those complexities which arise essentially from pipeline usage? The foremost complexity is extensive length of the pipeline, why are you bothered about extensive length? The moment they say extensive length, I have got lot of connections and there is always a probability that these connections can be subjected to leakage. The second issue is because of subsea or sea floor erosion, these pipelines are subjected to damage. So, they can also result in leakage of oil directly. Most importantly, these pipelines laid on the sea floor are not available for inspection. So, inaccessibility for inspection until you actually notice a leak of high volume is noticed. So, periodic maintenance of these kind of pipelines against leakage is not a day to day affair, because it is first expensive, secondly people actually do not plan for a continuous inspection process on pipelines. So, now these three reasons which add to the complexities of using pipelines for transporting oil from the production unit to the coastal side actually contribute to the potential source of failure which results in environmental imbalance to the marine ecosystem. There are other factors also which do affect the or which do contribute to the increase in the potential source of failure of the pipelines. So, let us say what are the other factors. The other factors could be a material defect, second could be corrosion, third could be the tectonic movements, that is sea quakes or earthquakes in seabed. Next could be the encountering ships and their anchoring systems. That is a very important problem. Therefore, pipelines can cause a small to a long term leakage. So, pipelines are responsible to cause a small to long term leakage, which is actually a botheration, because this will remain as a potential of threat over a large period of time. Which is a problem. Now, if you ask me a question, what would be the factors or what would be those contributors which will affect the intensity and scale of the impacts? Intensity and scale of impact that is caused by the pipeline failure vary depending upon the following factors. Let us say, what would the impact on marine pollution? There are several factors depending upon length of the pipeline, volume of flow, temperature, depth of laying, fourth, material selection, fifth, even I should say laying methods, because laying methods sometimes introduces residual stresses in the pipelines which can be avoided if you are able to smoothly lay the pipeline in the shore. So, now once we understood that either the underground storage reservoirs or the pipelines, which are essentially two means of sources of collecting the exploded crude oil, which can be further transported from the production unit to the coast for further processing, both of them or both methodologies have equal risks which causes impact to the ecosystems in marine environment. Then let us see what is an impact on the marine pollution. The impacts caused by the marine pollutants are essentially of three in nature. So, there are three types of impacts caused. One, as we all know, physical, two, chemical, three, biological. In nature, physical, I should say hazards, arise essentially during the conduct of marine service. The main source is conduct of marine service. To elaborate this, let us say if I send seismic signals which are generally generated during the marine survey, they are very hazardous to the living organisms in marine environment. So, the first source comes from the generation of seismic signals. The second could be use of explosive activities. It can be either for enabling for the smooth drilling, or it can be for enabling smooth drilling, or for smooth foundation, even it can be for platform abandonment. In all these three cases, generally people use explosives. In such cases, this will result in a mass migration of the commercial fish from the source of the platform to a different location. Okay? So, that is the main reason why this can result in a physical hazard, which is essentially arising from the drilling activity, which is one of the important variety or type of impact caused in marine pollution. The second, of course, could be the chemical pollution. As we have seen in the last lectures, we have made a table to understand what are the different sources which are actually contributing to the pollution in marine environment. So, chemical pollution has been seen as one of the major contributor of marine pollution. It is most important, it causes a more important impact on marine pollution, because large offshore accidents has resulted in oil spill in the past, they have led to very serious ecological consequences. And very importantly, the use of, the fate of unused platforms is a point of serious concern. The fate of unused underwater pipelines is another worry, and they actually pose again a parallel threat to marine ecology. So, we can call them as passive consequences which arise from offshore drilling activities. Let us try to understand the composition and consequence of oil hydrocarbons separately in detail. Let us say oil hydrocarbons, what is their composition and consequence? Based upon the literature review conducted by various researchers in the recent past, one can easily see from the literature that there is a global distribution of oil pollution which essentially originate from offshore platforms. In the last lectures, we already said that how one can local, regional and global effect of different elements present in the hydrocarbon. However, in general, the literature studies very clearly indicate that there has been a global distribution of oil pollution which essentially originate from the offshore platform sources. Having said this, let us now talk about what are the concerns in terms of the scale and consequences of pollution which are arising or which are rather increasing in the last few decades. We all agree one statement that oil input is undoubtedly seen as one of the serious threat to marine environment. Let us talk about input composition, let us say crude oil. Crude oil has got a wide differences in property which will lead to physical fractionalization of crude oil in the ocean environment. The moment crude oil mixes in ocean environment, it gets disintegrated, what we call as physical fractionalizing happens of the crude oil, which causes impact to marine environment in different forms. Crude oil that contains hydrocarbons with a few hybrid composition such as paraffins, naphthenic, naphthene aromatic, compounds that are present in crude oil are essentially sources of marine pollution. The complexity is actually the study of their behavior and the biological impact. They are actually governed by the physical and physiochemical properties. So, the behavior of crude oil, which is essentially required to study the impact of the crude oil on the marine environment, depends on various factors. These factors globally are physical and physiochemical in nature. They are governed by certain specific characteristics. One is the specific gravity. 2 the volatility, 3 the water solubility. Now, if you look at crude oil at a different perspective, it is present in the ocean environment in different forms. Each form has got a special kind of threat imposed on the marine environment. Let us see what are these forms of crude oil. Crude oil is present in different physical states. It can be present or seen as surface films. It can be also seen in dissolved forms. It can be seen as an emulsion. Essentially oil in water or water in oil. It is available in both the forms. It is also seen in suspended forms. It can be also seen as an oil aggregate that floats on the surface. Their fractions are generally absorbed by the suspended particles. The solid and viscous components gets deposited at the sea bottom and other compounds get accumulated in the water organisms. So, they get dispersed in different forms. Some of the fractions will be absorbed by the suspended particles present in marine environment. The solid and viscous components will get dissolved and deposited at the sea bottom, whereas other compounds will be accumulated in the water organisms, and they create lot of parallel serious threats to marine ecosystem. Now, the question comes, if we all know that crude oil of different content present in both physical and physiochemical properties which contribute seriously in different forms to marine pollution, can we detect them? Can we foresee them in advance? So, what are the problems when we identify or try to detect the oil content in marine pollution? So, presence of oil content in marine pollution, if you discuss this as a point, detection of this is a main problem. The question is why? Because the presence of this in marine environment is exactly similar to that produced by the marine living organisms. So, it is very difficult for you to identify whether the source is from the crude oil generated from the platform or it is from the marine fauna and flora. So, detection becomes even more difficult. When the oil presence is very low. With very high concentration. The concentration can be high, but the presence is low. If this combination occurs, and the detection becomes much more difficult. So, one can always adopt progression, duration and results of this transformation, because they depend on properties and composition of the crude oil. The one which is spread on the oil free surface, which occurs under the influence of gravitational forces, can be always blocked and the oil spill can be prevented by mechanical means, which we will see in the successive lectures. Now, let us try to understand oil spill as a physical review. Let us talk about oil spill as a physical review. Oil spill actually undergoes various stages. In each stage, it pollutes the marine ecology very significantly. What are those various stages which an oil spill undergoes? So, the various stages an oil spill undergoes could be a physical transport, during which it also pollutes. The second could be microbial degradation. The third stage could be aggregation, and the fourth could be self purification. During all these stages, it pollutes the marine environment, significantly. So, we will talk about the mechanical methods by which an oil spill can be contained, controlled, and what are those further difficulties leading to association or detection of factors which results in biological ecosystem imbalance, which are sourced essentially from oil and gas industries alone. So, in this lecture we talk about oil spill, we talk about drilling accidents, we talked about the complexities arising from the crude oil presence in different forms, and we also said how an oil spill in different stages is going to affect the marine environment. Thank you very much.